I see your anxiety, I see your fear, I see what you worry about online. And I speak to my friends as well in the industry and I see and I hear what they worry about. There are two types of worrying that photographers have. Beginner photographers worry about a completely different set of problems to good photographers. Good photographers worry about something very different. Now, what I want to talk about first is what beginners worry about. So hopefully you can see whether you're getting stuck in this thing, because it's a cycle. You go round and round and round. And a lot of people get stuck in this cycle. And if you can relate to this cycle, break it and start worrying about what's in the latter part of this video, because that is where the difference is made. Now, I'm going to start off with an absolute humdinger, because I fell for this trap chronically. And I went through some old archives recently to find a friend's wedding I photographed for them back yonder. Bokeh. The out of focus area of a photograph. You know, the bit that's not in focus. The bokeh balls, the swirl, the shape. Are they perfectly round? This, and I'm sure you can hear how ridiculous this sounds, is one of the things that every photographer fixates on at some point in their career, myself included. That 85 1.2 by Canon has beautiful bokeh. But by the time you're worrying about whether your out of focus part of the photograph is beautiful, and that's your main thing, I can tell you for nothing, your photo sucks. Nobody cares about the bit that's out of focus. The reason it became trendy is because SLRs became affordable to the masses, and it's a thing you can do that you can't do on a point and shoot easily. No one cares about bokeh but beginners. Which brings us into the next part, which is image sharpness. I won't go too far into this because I know you've all heard it all before from me. I harp on about this all the time. Beginners fixate on sharpness. I've ran workshops and I've had people zooming in on their cameras going, is it sharp enough? I'm like, well, mate, that is the least of your worries. Your composition's off and they're blinking. Sharpness be damned, your photo sucks. Spending days, weeks, months researching DxO scores on lenses is what beginners do, is what bad photographers do. Which brings me through to aberrations and fringing. Chromatic aberrations, distortion, fringing, lens issues, I will call them. Lens characters, perhaps. Bad lens design, for sure. Every time I say f16, there's somebody getting at me about diffraction. Every time I talk about something else, it's chromatic aberrations, colour fringing. I have never sat down with a good photographer and heard any of those words leave their mouth. If you're thinking about those things, if they're in your regular vocabulary, if you've Googled them, if you've looked for them, your photos suck. And I can say that with some authority. And the final one, which is something I'm still guilty of doing, I don't know why I do it, is zooming into 100% on all your images. You take a photograph and the first thing you do is look at the detail. Zoom into 100% and see what you can see. Like, why? Like, no one's doing that online, not on socials, and not on a print. I mean, you can get closer to the print, but you can't really zoom in. Why do we do it? Why do I do it? I know there's no need for it. Maybe I'm fascinated by the technology and how much detail it can capture, but it's kind of irrelevant by the time it's published. But yeah. So that's what people who suck at photography do. But what do people who are good at photography worry about? What are their concerns? What is it they're worrying about? And more importantly, this is what you should be worrying about. Now we'll start easy and we'll get more advanced. The first one is colours. Colours should be high on your agenda. Whether your colours are correct, for sure, but which colours you choose to include in your shot. It's not by chance that I have an orange light up here, a blue light up here, a white light back here, and a purple swatch that matches my purple work jacket, which was blue, but has become sun-dyed. Those items are composed in this frame for a reason. It's not by chance that I have the colour backgrounds to product that I do in my food. It's not by chance that I choose the outfit for the background in my portraiture. Those colours are purposeful choices based on many different things depending on the next point, which is narrative. Without narrative, it's just a photograph. Anyone can take a photograph, anyone can take a pretty photograph. It's not difficult. I mean, AI can do it. It's really not difficult. Creating narrative is much more difficult. And the biggest confusion people have about narrative is that a story has to be told in a single photograph in a 3-point narrative, like a beginning, middle, and end. That's not always the narrative. The narrative can be conceptual, it can be abstract, it can be subtractive from the image, it can be so many things. But there needs to be a narrative. And often, bringing us nicely through to the next point, I've got segues galore here. The narrative is based within social context, and social context is incredibly important. The subject matter I choose to photograph has a specific social context to the work I produce. The food I put in front of a camera has a social context. I don't just go, what shall we photograph today? Choosing what is put in front of the camera is incredibly important, regardless of the type of photography you do. Whether you make images like me and you create the whole thing, or whether you capture images like a wedding photographer or documentary photographer, you're choosing what is in the frame. And that social context to it is really important. Which is where originality comes in. Because if your work is not original, it is pointless. Every time I take a shot, I have to try and take something that is original that has not been done before. Obviously, there are crossovers, there are overlaps. Sometimes it's like this much difference. It's like doing research. If you want to do a research paper, you can do quasi-research where it's completely out there. But normally you take a study and you adapt it. You take a study, you add to it. You take a study, you change the population, or whatever it may be. That's what we should always be doing. If there's no originality to my work, it has no value. If I'm just copying someone else's work, it has no value. And the last thing, the most important thing, the thing which affects all of us as professionals, but we really can't do much about, is industry trends. Is our work in trend? And if it's not in trend, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to stick by our guns and know that there's always something from an out of trend area being shot? Are we going to try and follow the trend, but does that affect our social context? Does it affect the sort of originality of our work, or can we move with the times? Like, I don't dress the same now that I did 10 years ago, and in 10 years time, I won't dress like this. I'll be in whatever hipster outfit's hip at the time, I guess. But are we, where are we in this, and how do we market that, more importantly, depending on which way we go? So that's what I see as being the differences. Let me know in the comments below what you see as being the differences, because I'd love to know.